Hello. Hi, everyone. On today's session of Startup Conversations, I have Carl. And Carl is the founder of TAGR, a strategy consultancy based in Singapore. He has over 20 years of designing and managing customer insights. And today he shared with me something really interesting. So basically, Carl said that everybody comes into the world with a certain worldview, and that is basically all that we operate out from. Carl said that it is good for us to be able to review, to take stock of how we operate, and really look into the way that we are doing things and the way that our perceptions are. So it's always been said not to reinvent the wheel, but the wheel is constantly being reinvented. So today, I am going to speak to Carl to ask him about his love for research, what got him into the space, what is he planning to do, and what he inspired him to start TAGR. This is not a business or feel good podcast. We want to go a little bit deeper into finding out who Carl is, what makes him tick, what motivates him, what challenges him. And we've got Carl with a really, really lovely Irish accent here. So, Carl, very nice to speak with you today.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. I'm normally the person who's interviewing people, so this is a new experience for me, and I will say for sure a very scary one. So anybody who's watching who has imposter syndrome or gets worried about stuff, I'm going through that like right now. So be nice in comments, please. Don't add me. I'm going through something. We're going through together, maybe. Let's say.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about it, Carl. Do you know if there'll be any of your like friends, family, or anybody that you've asked to tune in today?
I don't know, and honestly, these days I tend not to try and think about those things. When I launch the business, and especially like on social media or LinkedIn particularly, editing, self-censoring content, worried what my friends or colleagues or peers would think about it,
Right.
was a big problem for quite a few months, actually. Second guessing, will they like it? Will I offend somebody? Will they not like it? Will they just slag me off and say, what are you doing? Really, really hard. So, I picked up some tips along the way, and obviously
Right.
dealing with people like you and others who can give really good practical advice to startup founders. It's the idea of, well, you have to think about, well, what is it that you're trying to do? What is it that you're hopefully trying to sell? What's the benefit of that information to somebody? And it might just be one person, but why not go for it? I mean, a lot of my content on LinkedIn, I do some, humorous type of content, and sometimes it's a very specific, deep cut that maybe only one person will get the joke. But I've got this. I've had people connecting with me, and I do the same. We're looking
Right.
for like-minded people a lot of the
Yeah.
time, right?
And
So you have to
sometimes
put
it's
yourself
like
out there, basically.
life is already so hard. Why should we care about what people think, right? We should do
Well,
whatever makes us happy.
exactly. And if other people are talking about me, it's none of my business.
Yeah.
It's theirs.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be listening
Yeah.
to what they're saying. But I
Yeah.
like, I think it's just if anybody is worried about that, who's listening, just do it and then see what happens, because you may get some good critical feedback, and you just may get some positive feedback. You might just make a new connection, and that may change the direction of your thinking or your business. So
Kenneth
it's
says
worth doing
hi.
it. What have you got to lose?
Hi, Kenneth. Kenneth says hi.
Hi, Kenneth.
Hi, Kenneth. Okay, so let's go into the first question, right? What you got you started in business, Carl?
In TAGR.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm a sort of a career market researcher. I would say I'm a vocational market researcher. I think of it as a trade. I mean, it is a trade. I take the aspects of like SMR and ISO and all of the structure and the responsibility really, really seriously. And I really enjoy it. I mean, I started way back as a telephone interviewer, which is sort of coming back into fashion now. And it was just like a summer job type of thing. And I couldn't understand that I was getting paid like 10 British pounds an hour to talk to people. And all I had to do was make sure I read what was on the screen. And then I might get bonused if I got like a really good strike rate. And I thought, this is quite a nice job, really. I'd never heard of it. We didn't have it in Ireland at that time because our population was quite small. So I sort of went through the the typical career path of moving, say, into operations, then moving onto the client side, winning business, hunter, farmer, or in Hong Kong, when I moved to Hong Kong, business getter, you know. And it's really good. But what I was finding is there were two things happening, right? Rationally and emotionally, two things were happening. On a rational level, when you work in, say, bigger market research agencies, there will always
Right.
be a ceiling that you are going to hit because they can't afford you all the time, right? And they need to let some people go to bring some people in. That's just
Right.
business, right? Profit margins are very, very important. And a lot of bigger market research agencies are sort of owned by equity firms or people who just weren't traditionally in that business. So for them, the Excel spreadsheet every month or every quarter, that's the greatest indicator of success. Whereas for some clients, it's the depth of the relationship and the understanding of their needs.
Yeah.
So it's not a surprise. I'm not the only one that has done this. There's many sort of like seasoned or senior researchers who set up their own shops purely,
Right.
for many different reasons. Mine personally was I wanted to just do a mix of research. I'm a qualitative market researcher, but I'm also a quantitative market researcher. I'm a generalist. I'm not a specialist, and that has never really been in fashion. It's becoming into fashion, but it never really was in the traditionally agency model where you have a qualitative department and a quantitative department. So
Right.
I sort of reject binarization in life.
Right.
I definitely reject it in business.
So basically, you got into the business, Carl, because you um, were sort of concerned that in it could be one day where the business, the company that you were in may uh, do a retrenchment exercise.
A little
Is
bit of
it?
that, but honestly, I
Yeah.
mean, I was in a big agency before TAGR, and I wasn't
Yeah.
really pulling my weight, you might say, in the amount of revenue I was bringing in. I think I
Ah.
was doing quite okay in terms of profitability and things, but I
Right.
didn't really fit into a model where you can be a generalist because I was doing qualitative work, which was upsetting the qualitative departments, and then I was doing quantitative work, thinking about it from a more of a qualitative angle. So it was sort of weird, and it was a bit of a square peg in a round hole situation. And I love
Right.
that company. I still have friends there, and they're fantastic. But I couldn't make it work for me, and I have very strong views on how I think research should work. And it's basically, I guess, two different models, right? I wasn't selling, and I'm not. This is not to denigrate market research business. It was sort of a McDonald's atmosphere where you know exactly what you're going to get, and that's what you're going to sell. I was sort of trying to make my own sandwich that wasn't on the board. And I don't regret that, and I think that's fine. But that was mainly the reason I wanted to say, well, can I do this? Can I
Right.
test my own theory and see if it
Right.
works, and then see if I can get some people to go along with that? So
And
that was
the,
sort of the
you
inception.
needed that autonomy to be able to explore.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, I think every market researcher, well, I wouldn't say we struggle with it, but it's the obligation of your job is that you have to have a strong point of view. And in between projects, like if I was working for a company like HP, which I did for quite a few years, in between projects, I still have to be thinking about their business issues. And I still
Right.
have to be working out what is the worldview that could benefit them or not. If I wasn't being paid for it on a per project basis, then I wouldn't be thinking about it. So
Yeah.
that sort of model, it doesn't really work in the bigger agencies as far as my experience goes. You will
Yeah.
have some clients who you can work with for a long time, but often it is on a sort of an ad hoc basis rather than say continually tracking things. So I guess I was wanting to just have a much longer term relationship with a client.
Mm.
I call it sort of like client ethnography, so I get as immersed in their business as possible and then try and help them understand the customers. Because
Mm. Mm.
most of the time, we talk about customer journeys all the time. Customers are fairly static, to be honest.
Sorry.
Customers are fairly static. Hey, I've moderated focus groups where a lot worse than that has happened, so don't worry. I'm basically unshockable. Um, so yeah, it was just this idea of just wanting to be a bit deeper, having the longer relationship with the clients, because it's really hard. It's hard for a
Yeah.
client of any size to have a really good understanding of their customers because there's so many pieces of the puzzle in between them and their customer. Me as a startup, I know who my customers are, and I will give them all of the attention that they need, like probably over and above what they're expecting. Now, if we grow and I have more clients and I can't do it myself, then that becomes a problem. And I think that's a problem for most clients, actually. How do we know all of our customers all of the time? So for me, just to make a short answer very long, I wanted to have control of that process to get embedded, go deep, and really, really think about how are we going to make people's behavior change in a way that benefits them, but also benefits the brand.
Right. So we have a couple of people who say hello. Let me just get to this,
Hey,
and then
Bob.
I will ask you a couple of questions as well.
Sure.
William from outer space. William, why are you from outer space? And we have Bob. And William said CGs, two CGs. What a twin. Yeah. So you mentioned wanting to have that longer term relationship with the client, wanting to be able to connect with them deeper. And the bigger agencies that you were at, the bigger companies that you were at, were not able to allow you to do so.
Well, not for me. I mean, some of them did. I had a long run with JJBC when I worked in an agency
Right.
in Hong Kong. I had a long run
I
with
see.
BlackBerry and a long run with
Yeah.
HP.
Right.
But
But
I
with,
can't.
with right. But with,
With
with this in mind, right? Not this notion of wanting to spend a longer time with these clients in terms of that relationship that you're trying to build at TAGR. Would you say that in a way it could be conflicting for the business because you would want as many clients as possible for the business?
No, it's not a conflict because I actually don't. I want to have a cap. I want to be like
Right.
Jag in Singapore, which is a really good restaurant in Duxton. For those of you who don't know it, go to it because
I love Jack.
they don't have
Yeah,
a menu.
sorry.
They just have produce that is seasonal, and you come in and they ask you what do you need, and then they prepare it for you based on your needs. And they have a cap on the amount of PAX or
Right.
passengers or customers that they can do
Yeah.
at any one time. It costs a little
Right.
bit more money. I can't deny that. Don't at me if you go to Jag and you see the bill.
How do
But
you spell it? How do you spell it? I'm trying to search for
Jag,
it.
like JAG. I
Okay.
seem to end up with AGs or tags, JAGs, CGs. There's something going on there that I don't
Okay.
know. But yeah, it's that
Okay.
idea that like if we grow in THR, and I do have ambitions to grow, the growth would be based more on that type of restaurant model. I have a hero in Gordon Ramsay, not because he swears a lot. I swear a lot. Because he has this perfectionist attitude where how you do anything is how you do everything. And that model in restaurants like his, when you get the Michelin stars and you get the achievement
Yeah.
based on
Just
your
sharing
ability,
this
yeah,
Jack
based on your
restaurant that you're
ability
talking
to achieve sort of as close to perfection as possible, or at least to deliver on what you promised.
about. Right.
That's important. So I would be thinking if THR gets like more than 10 staff, then I would be wanting to groom and grow somebody who would take full autonomy and responsibility for the business and pay them accordingly as well. So that's sort of the ambitious growth target, is to go in a relationship with clients who need to have a long-term partner and to not make sort of quick insight decisions that may not be of any importance. And it happens all the time these days that we react really quickly to things that may not have necessarily been of benefit. Clubhouse, for example. Every marketing person in Singapore last year was talking about Clubhouse. Clubhouse, have to be on Clubhouse. Clubhouse is dead now, and anybody with a memory would have realized that was going to happen. Similar to a degree with NFTs. NFTs is like Beanie Babies or Beanie Toys for people of my age. It's a bit of a bubble for how it's working, right? So basically, yeah, it's having that control over what do we stand for in TAGR, what are we trying to do, and then finding the like-minded clients who also want that for their customers, and they want it for their products and their services. So we have to be sort of on the research side quite patient, and give the people what they want basically, and then I have to work out how to manage that if we achieve growth faster than we're expecting. But that's a
Right.
challenge I accept. I mean that's part of any brand has that challenge, I would think.
Yeah. And let's go to the next question, which is quite aligned with what you're speaking about right now. Wanting to grow with the clients that you're working with, right?
Yeah.
How do you find meaning in your work?
I guess because I'm just talking to people like all of the time. If I wasn't a researcher, I'd be a hairdresser or a taxi driver or a bar person,
I
somebody
thought
who's
you would
just
be
talking
making
to people.
strawberry jam.
I would, but that's part of it. I'd have a cafe with my strawberry jellies and my strawberry jams, and I'd be tailoring the experience and understanding the people as people. I mean, dovetailing it back to quantitative versus qualitative, when I have my qualitative hat on, I don't really care about any of the things the client wants to know in terms of here's question to ask people. I want to live the experience of those people and then make up my decisions around, well, how do we then make the brand fit into that? That's the most important thing to me. So I find a lot of meaning in that when I can help solve a problem for a client, or I can just sometimes just genuinely listen to another human and learn something from myself about it. I think we've talked before casually about, I remember being in morning prayers in Jakarta in somebody's house. They're making me a cup of coffee, and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, this is exactly the same setup as my house back in Ireland back in the day. And Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? There was a local version of that on TV, and I was like, gosh, everywhere I go in the world and do research, we find the structure and the construct is pretty much the same in terms of the family unit, perhaps, or the breakfast, lunch, all of these things. There's a lot of norms that we have in common. And then some of the other structures are, societal based. So I find meaning in trying to stick together all of the commonalities and sort of making that big hope blanket for the client and saying, here's how this might work. If you're a multinational company in Asia, for example, you might think, well, Vietnam's a developing market, so we'll go there last. But in certain things like cryptocurrency, for example, Vietnam's quite advanced and other countries are far behind. So you have to be able to have that bigger worldview in a sense, or widen the lens or widen the focus to be able to really, give good value to a client. And I get a lot of meaning from that. Like, I love that part of it.
Right. Rina Lin, do you know Rina Lin? She's watching from the Philippines. She says hello to you.
Hello, Rina Lynn.
She says hi.
Give my love to the
Okay.
Philippines.
Yeah, yeah. I think earlier you also mentioned this thing about like reinventing the wheel, right? You mentioned how the wheel is constantly being reinvented. Um, could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I follow there's a lot of W's in research and marketing, like who, what, when, where, why, how, all that stuff. I quite like the, why not, and what for. Why are we doing things? And I find there's resistance, there's a lot of it's just human nature to sort of be a bit cliche driven, right? So it's like,
Right.
oh, it's like comparing oranges and apples. And it's like, well, they're both round, they're both fruit, they have pips, you can make juice, they're involved in mobile phones. Why not compare apples and oranges? Similarly, oh, let's not reinvent the wheel. It's like we wouldn't have the city flyer in Singapore if somebody hadn't thought to reinvent the wheel. So I'm not just using an example to prove my point, but things should be questioned because things change. You know, 20 years ago, the idea of not having a landline in your house and using a mobile phone instead was like, no way. People were super resistant to it. Similarly, putting a website address on advertising was seen as crazy in the early days of the internet. So, and now,
Right.
of course, it's like if you don't, like you'd be a complete idiot. So things
Right.
change all the time, and a lot of the time it's changing around us, right? So there's certain people in the world of business, like researchers, I would say, who need to pay attention to that and need to have a quite a long, a good memory rather, and be able to reference things that happened in the past, and if they can be an indicator of future things that may change. Like, I'll give you the example of David Beckham, who I think everybody knows. But when he came back from a holiday in Thailand, and he was pictured wearing a sarong, and the UK media sort of jumped on it, like he's effeminate, he's this, he's that, and around that at that time, metrosexuality was burgeoning, or it was like a trend about to happen. And I didn't say he ushered it in, but it was like a glitch in the matrix, when the cat goes past, where things suddenly shifted a little bit. Now, these things are happening a lot of the time, but we're just not consciously paying attention to them, particularly for brands, because we're focused on our product, or in the
Right.
agency side, we're focused on our department. So
Yeah.
it's almost
Carl,
like we
let
need
me
to be,
let me jump in here.
yeah, go on.
You mentioned like I mean the premise of research is that you always constantly need to question, right? And reinventing the wheel has done a lot of good for society in many
Yeah,
cases. Are there any instances where you think it's actually bad question?
no, I don't actually. I don't at all because, I certainly believe in widening the pie. And I think that lots of people are worried about this. They worry
Right.
about should we question everything? And then it might lead to
Right.
some sort of so-called cancel culture or something.
Yeah.
I fundamentally disagree with that. I think that we're always supposed to be questioning ourselves.
Mhm.
I don't think that most of us in marketing and research actually know anything, to be honest. And we should be
Mhm.
proud to admit that, because we're continually trying to find out things. Because we don't predict things that become game changers. We didn't really predict Netflix, for example. Maybe some
Yeah.
researchers, and I'm pretty sure a lot of researchers thought, well, that could happen. But it sort of happened around, a lot of things happen around us, and we just don't see them coming, or we don't give enough of a guideline to brands to take advantage of that. A classic during COVID, everyone's saying, okay, we'll all move on to Zoom. They could have been doing that for 10, 15 years. But I say me as all market researchers listening, we didn't maybe push hard enough on that.
Right.
Maybe we pulled our punches in the reporting, maybe you should do this, perhaps. I think there's a real need to be able to say, questioning things isn't bad. Questioning things leads to perhaps new ideas. And it might be that
Mhm.
when you question it, you realize actually it works fine. But for me, it's like it's part of your every morning. You check your wallet, check your keys, check your biases, and that's why you should be questioning things. Who is this affecting? That's not me.
Right.
Type of idea. Because for me, that means it's more inclusive, definitely more equity, or at least the opportunity for that to happen. But if you just don't accept things, then somebody's going to probably be disadvantaged in some way, right?
I
So you
really
got to
like that.
you got to
I
speak
really
up
like
for the
that you
little guy,
said check your keys, check your biases in the morning. That's
Yeah.
a great one.
I got strong views on that. I changed my strapline on LinkedIn. It's like the patriarchy is an antique, but it's not priceless. So it's okay to smash it. Like nothing bad
Right.
will happen if you take away the idea that 1% of the world's population are richer than everybody else combined. That's something that should
Mhm.
be questioned all the time. How can we be more equitable? And there's a lot of things that stem from faulty logic, and then they just
Right.
become common or just repeated norms of behavior. So yeah, questioning things isn't a bad thing. I guess knowing when, that's the old saying, right? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the
Mhm.
difference, right? So yeah, knowing when to hold your tongue. But I really believe, somebody's afraid to ask a question, so ask the question on their behalf, perhaps. But definitely,
Mhm.
just from a professional point of view, that's my job. I'm supposed
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Don't want to offend any creatives and all of those things, but it's like you sometimes have to say, why are we doing it like that? Or why not
Right.
do it like something else? Or
Right.
whatever it is.
Always question. Check your
Yeah,
keys, check your biases.
exactly. Check your biases
Love it.
particularly, because there's like 50, 60 different biases. We think, hey, I'm not sexist, I'm not racist, so I don't have any bias. It's like, of course you have
Mhm.
loads of bias.
Mhm. You know, this
People
this
logging in
reminds me
today, they
of
had a bias. They thought they were going to hear something awesome, and now they're like, should have checked my bias.
this reminds me of this book called The Fifth Discipline. Sorry, is it The Fifth Discipline
Hmm.
on the learning organization. And it talks a lot about mental models and
Yeah,
yeah, we have a certain mental model and I guess most people know that. It's just that we don't really question too much of why we do the things that we do.
exactly. I mean, I think I was saying before, like it's not that long ago that women couldn't vote
Yeah.
in the US,
Yeah.
or women couldn't wear pants,
Hmm.
trouser pants. I mean, it's like, oh, that's odd or that's weird. That's just a mental model, or that's just a societal construct. It doesn't matter. If men want to wear
Yeah.
kilts or dresses or anything, it doesn't actually devalue them as a human or change their ability to do a task. That's just one
Hmm.
example. There's many, many examples of things that we thought were the right way to do it. But it's like there might be a
Yeah.
different way. Otherwise we
Yeah.
wouldn't have Pop Tarts. Put the jam in the bread before you put it in the toaster. If somebody hadn't questioned why, we'd never have that. That would be as well as, of
Okay,
course, equity, equal rights, and everything else. But Pop Tarts,
let
number one.
let's go to the next question. Next question is, what's the biggest challenge you experienced in business? Maybe let's go to the first question first. Yeah.
Okay, the biggest challenge is definitely like stuff like imposter syndrome, or just showing up, honestly, and that's as a independent, as well as
Mm-hmm.
actually when I worked in big agencies too. It's a bit of a slog to go out and put yourself on the line. right? I
Mhm.
always think though, like I'm not a doctor or a nurse or a firefighter or somebody who's got a real hard job. I basically am the kid in school who you asked, does she like me or does he like me? And then I'd go and find out and say, yeah or no. You know, that's a market researcher. I'm not doing anything particularly onerous, but you know, you're serving the needs of people who are dependent on the information, and that can be stressful. So that is a bit of a challenge. And it's the imposter syndrome. Not that I don't think I'm good at my job. I think I'm pretty good at my job. I mean,
Right.
I'm as good as somebody else.
Right.
But the idea of, will somebody take it seriously? Like when I got my first proper client, right? A name that you will all be familiar with, which I won't say. I felt like so proud, but also so relieved and scared. It was like, okay, let's
Mhm.
see if this works, like this whole idea. So the whole challenge of you know, self-censoring or you know,
Mhm.
stopping. Like recently, right? I'm like, this happened as literally as 2 days ago. There was a guy I wanted to connect with on LinkedIn that I had connected with, wanted to talk to him about potentially working together on a project. And I just put it off, put it off, put it off, put it off all the time. I
Right.
finally reach out to him and he's like, ah, crap. You know, I'm moving to a different company, but I would actually really like to talk to you. And I was like,
I
why didn't I do
see.
it 6 months ago? So it's that
I
idea that the
see.
little voice in your ear telling you not to do
Mhm.
something, that's when I
Mhm.
should be questioning it and saying why, you know, and then just go
Uh,
ahead and do it. So overcoming it is just trying it. You know, you're not going to be
uh,
perfect at setting up a business. You're not going to be perfect at any of these things, but you just have to try every day and just get on with it, you know, and ask for help. I mean, that's a big one that I would say to anybody out there. Ask for help, ask for somebody else's advice. There's loads of people in the business community who are very happy to give advice and to mentor. There's people like EGN, Executive Groups Network, there's marketing societies, or they're just social groups. You know, everything that we do in this business is dependent on the opinions of people. So, you know, asking help of anybody is relevant. You know, you see some
mhm.
Grab taxi drivers and they have like 4 or 5 different mobile phones on the go, and you think, God, in a different life, you'd be, you know, running operations for, you know, a much bigger company. So that's, I'm not saying you ask everybody, right? But there's no harm in just using people as a sounding board, right? Everything is
Right.
potentially a resource. So when you're a
Right.
startup founder, I guess you get used to that really quickly, that everything can be multi-purposed or everybody is potentially going to help in some way. But yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that's what you do. You know, you just be brave, I guess, and or try to be brave even if you're not. You know?
And I have a question. Like this goes back to what you said, right? About like questioning. It's never bad to question. It's always good to question. Um, and I guess going coming back to this, which is where you are talking about having a sounding board, asking for opinions. Do you ever feel that you get too many opinions?
No, I don't actually, because again, no, it may be because I'm a hybrid, right? In quantitative research, sometimes we would go, okay, if it's less than 5%, you disregard it. You know? And
Mm-hmm.
then you think, oh, maybe in that 5%, somebody had the best business idea, right?
Right.
So I can't. I have to look under every stone, you know. And I mean, that's sort of what we do in quantitative research. We're counting stones. So I
Right.
have to, and I have to listen to every voice, and I have to, you know, hold it up to the light and think, works or not. Because again, if I don't, it's my biases. So I need to check it
Mm-hmm.
before I
Mm-hmm.
can say, okay, categorically,
Mm-hmm.
that's a dumb idea. I'm not going to do it. But I
Mm-hmm.
will always think,
Mm-hmm.
okay, maybe I'll revisit that in 6 months. So, you know, we keep that, I
Right.
keep that in the fridge, I would call it, you know, it's not going to go off, but it will
Right.
keep sort of fresh. And then 6 months later, I can
Right.
go, yeah, definitely not a good idea. So you have to be sort of systematic about it. And, you know, you have
But
to
at the
sort
same
of
time, there's so
say,
many ideas, right? How do you like pick the right one, and how are you confident that you?
honestly, honestly, I have notebooks and I write them down for
I
ideas,
see.
LinkedIn content, whatever it is, jot it down and write it down. I purposely don't do it electronically because it's like Barack Obama and he was talking about writing and he's like, once you put something into Word, it just
Mm-hmm.
gives it the legitimacy because it looks nice, right? But it might be rubbish.
Right.
If I read something that I've written by hand, I have to edit it like before it goes into the computer, and it's at that stage between the just organic idea becoming a better idea. That's the stage that I need to go through. So I encourage that. You know, take notes,
Mm-hmm.
write notes, and then look at it
Mm-hmm.
later and think, okay, what was I trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
Right.
write legibly, listeners.
Right.
You might have a great
Yeah.
idea that you look at and go, what the hell is that?
I have this problem, which is I have very really horrible handwriting.
Okay.
So I would write and I would go back and wouldn't know what I wrote.
I've done I've done it so many times, you've no idea. And it's like, that was the idea. Because I had this idea before, for this is going to sound a bit weird, but I had this idea for my wife likes high heels basically, and I wanted, like, if I was a woman, I'd say I'd want to be able to control the size of the heel,
Yeah,
like sort of
yeah, yeah, yeah,
telescopic
yeah,
heel,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Precisely,
They're
yeah.
now in the market, but I had that
Yeah.
idea. I think, I mean, many other people probably had the idea too, but I
Yeah.
didn't act on it, and if I had have, maybe I would have been more successful. So yeah, I write down everything. I give it a sense check or a smell test. I check it against my own biases, and then I think, okay, we'll go for it then, and don't prevaricate around it. But then that then becomes a model, and then that becomes less of a chore the more I do it. So you have to have some sort of plan that works, and just periodically refresh it or think about it. I would say.
And like training yourself to
Yeah,
to think in a certain way to check your biases, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and it's just doing it. Yeah, something within your line of sight where you work, write it down
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
What would
Yeah.
Gordon Ramsay do? you know, or something like
Okay, so I think we're going to move on to the last question, Carl.
that. Okay.
And if there's anybody like who's watching today, today we have Carl. Carl is an expert in research, so he really believes in questioning your biases. Check your keys, check your biases in the morning. That's a really great one, and how we should be reinventing the wheel. So if you have any questions for him about how he thinks about things, or just anything that you want to ask him, feel free to comment down, and he will get back to you. We do have like a couple of minutes before we end, so you can comment down, and I'll ask him the question. And in the meantime, let's move on to the last question, Carl.
Okay.
What are your plans for the future? And this is not TAGR's plans, but your plans specifically.
I want to open a bar somewhere. Actually, what I've always
Right.
wanted to do, right? Honestly, I don't think I'm in the right part of the world for this, but I could amend it. Honestly, I've really always wanted to. I wanted to be a social worker before I did market research. I ended up
Right.
in market research, and I stayed in market research. And now I have this lifestyle that social work couldn't support. But
Oh no.
I mean, yeah, look at me, I'm glamorous. I wanted to have this idea of helping homeless people get back into society by having some sort of hotel or hostel that was run or staffed by people with
Right.
homeless people, for example. And after a certain period of time, 6 months or 9 months, they're back into society, or hopefully getting back in. We refresh, so some sort of a charitable endeavor of some sort. So I'd still like to be able to do that. And maybe it's for, like, Singapore, rehabilitate the yellow ribbon, is it? Rehabilitating
Yeah.
prisoners, people who've been in
Yeah.
jail, who have many doors shut on them. I don't see there's anything wrong with actually trying to give people a leg up or to help. So that's what I've been really trying to do with the business, is to find some way to be more
Give back.
embedded in the society that we serve, because it's a secret in market research, but all of the panel companies, they're not very representative. So we haven't done representative sampling for a long time. It's all purposive sampled, I can say. So there's many
Right.
people in society who are not generally, their views aren't heard and they aren't collected.
see.
And we know, like, the Black and Asian community in the US, that's a real problem. I believe even in Singapore, which is a good society, there's probably lots of unheard voices. For whatever reason, maybe they're just too small a minority to have their stories told. But I want to hear those voices, because I might get something useful from it that I can sell. But no, I genuinely want to give that voice, right? Because that's how we do evolve as a society. And if people look back, if I look back in my life, or people look back in TAGR and said, what, he devoted all of his life to doing PowerPoint charts, I'd feel a bit like gutted. And that's what I don't want to do. I don't want to just do PowerPoint charts. And that's pretty much why we set up TAGR. And we just
That's
want to
really
continue doing
nice.
it. Yeah.
That's really nice. Yeah, and there are like increasingly a bigger group of rough sleepers in Singapore as well.
It's happening, but
Yeah.
we're not out at night. We're not seeing it because we're at home in our
Yeah.
beds, very comfortable, and forgetting
Yeah.
that we're privileged. You know,
Yeah.
white men really get upset when you say you're privileged, and it's like it's not necessarily an insult. It's just it's a sort of a factual statement. You know, when you were growing
Mm-hmm.
up, you had a roof over your head most of the time, and you were from a
Mm-hmm.
society that was built by the patriarchy. So you automatically had more benefit than somebody in a different part of the world, right? That's just a
Right.
fact. So it's not insulting to say that you have privilege. In fact, quite the opposite. Sometimes it's like I'm privileged to meet you. You know, so it's just thinking about those things. There's somebody else out there who may just benefit from help, and whether it's a people go, but you can't hire somebody who's been in prison because they're untrustworthy. It's like look at some of the prime ministers or presidents in the world. No, they're not
Yeah.
exactly moral beacons. You know what I mean? So you have to give a second chance to people, and you have to aggressively go and find the opportunity to do it. You know, we can't just
Mm-hmm.
all sit here going, "Let's break the bias, Wakanda forever." Go and do something about it. Hire somebody,
Right.
or mentor somebody, or recommend somebody. You can't just say, "Hey, I'm going to do it tomorrow." It's like then you'd be like, those energy targets. We will be carbon neutral by 2070.
Oh no, you went there.
If I said to my wife, I'm going to make dinner by next week, I guess slap to my head. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. So we have to be able to just take action right now.
Yeah.
On that point, you're watching those science movies when they go, you're going to go back in time. Make sure you don't do anything because one small thing will change the world. If I flip that and reframe it, I'm like, well, if I do one small thing now, then it may have a massive repercussion in later years. So why don't I do it now? If
Yeah.
not now, when? I know it's a cliche, but I think there's a lot of truth in it. There's no time to lose, and there's nothing to lose from it either. You'll at the worst of it, you'll make a connection or a friend, or you'll just
Yeah.
get a different point of view, and it might make you go, okay, maybe I can change something. So it's just worthwhile. And people are generally friendly. We're social animals. We're not gonna reject people if you do it like that. We're not recruiters who don't, who ghost you once you don't fit with their requirements. Sorry, nothing but love for recruiters, sincerely. Actually, a friend of mine, Mark Lapine in Hong Kong, he set up his own recruitment type firm, another startup,
Right.
purely to solve that problem of unfairness or perceived unfairness in recruitment firms. So if you're listening, Mark, you owe me
You
five
can
thousand
mention him in the
dollars.
comments.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you so much, Carl. I really like the last part, right, where you talked about, if not now, then when. Yeah, so for people who want to connect with Carl, if you're interested in what Carl is doing, feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn.
thank
If you
you.
want to set up a hotel for people who are homeless, who are rough sleepers, feel free to connect with him as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
or if you
yeah.
need help with any of those type of volunteering stuff, I volunteer a lot. Honestly, I just don't like to talk about it. But I'm keen. I'm happy to pitch in. I'm not a freeloader by any means. And I think the more of us who have that mentality, we realize actually that's what the world looks like. We're
Right.
fed a constant stream of negativity and bad news and bad things are happening. When in fact, actually, we're in pretty good shape compared to where we were, say, 100 years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
that sort of giving mentality, givers and takers, that book about that whole thing. There's not If you self-censor yourself from trying to change the world of your business or your community, then nothing will change. If you challenge yourself a little bit, if you put your neck on the line, you will find like-minded people, and then maybe you will just change somebody's world, if not the whole world. And I think that's a really useful endeavor. And that's why I balance that part of my life with the business part of the life, and that's why I have
Mm-hmm.
equity for myself, or balance at least I try to. People listening to this will go, no, he's not. He's contrarian. He just argues to toss over everything. He's la la la. And yeah, I am that at times. But we do live in a society, as George Costanza would say. So we have to play our part, honestly.
Mm-hmm. 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 Okay, thank you, Carl. Very,
Sure.
very nice speaking with you. So
Yeah,
with
you
that,
too.
we'll end this broadcast. If there's anybody who's watching later on, please do comment, say hi to Carl. You have any questions for him? I think that he will still be paying attention to this broadcast as
Oh
well
yeah,
after the session. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and very nice to speak with you today, Carl. If
Thank you.
anybody else wants to come on this broadcast, let me know. and I could interview you next. Okay, thank you
Brilliant.
so much.
Happy weekend, everybody.